went to see a movie last night with Blanche at the Rafael Theater here, which is really a wonderful theater that shows all these independent films, really, really independent films. And what they showed last night was a movie called Awake, and it's about Swami Yogananda, who on some level was credited with bringing yoga to America, and his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, is probably one of the core teachings for people who are discovering Eastern practice. As I say in the movie, he was not the first Easterner to come here. He was preceded by maybe 20 years by someone named Swami Vivekananda, who's a remarkably good writer on Eastern teachings, and he was part of what's called a Vedanta school, and if you ever read his books, they're very, very clear. Yogananda's autobiography was something I discovered in the, I'll call it the post-LSD 60s, because there was nothing else out there really. There was so little, and there was a bookstore somewhere on Broadway, like 43rd Street, that I would walk by whenever I would go to Broadway, and there was always a picture of Autobiography of a Yogi sitting in the window, and I would look at it and go, like, I would just think of people lying on a bed of nails. It would be so meaningless to me when I was early in my life. And also he had long hair and robes, and it just kind of looked, I don't know, something it was easy for me to dismiss. After the LSD experience in the 60s, that was so shocking to my system, because it kind of said nothing is what it appears to be, and the world is more inside you than outside you, or some mixture of the two, and it really was kind of very hard to grasp. I started to read his autobiography, and not only started, I front to cover, and he established for me a kind of sensibility about what it means to be a yogi, what it means to be enlightened, what it means to be on the path, what the path entails. He kind of laid it out in a way that was somewhat practical and also full of magic. And I was drawn to all of that. I knew from my LSD experiences that the world was other, that it was full of magic, if you will, full of supernatural wonder, as well as the materialized form of it, but I knew it was bigger than my mind had ever imagined. So when I read the book, I just completely believed everything he was saying as kind of truth, and I liked so many of the elements of it. I liked the guruship, the idea of finding a teacher, that there were people out there who knew this stuff, that I wasn't alone in the world with this sudden exposure to something that was undescribable, indescribable, or left to my own devices to deal with this. There were people out there. I mean, I also knew from Tim Leary and Richard Alpert, Baba Ram Dass, that there was a lot of Tibetan involvement in this realm. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, which they translated, was a guide for people going through psychedelic experience. But the teachings of Yogananda sort of struck a chord, and they paved a path. And it became the path, in a sense, that I followed, in that I knew I had to go to the East. I thought I had to go to India, and I also kind of thought I had to meet Tibetans. Those were like the two big things in my life. They were going to be the teachers. Forgive me, I never thought about Greece, and I never thought about, the teachings of Plato or Pythagoras. But they weren't part of my upbringing. I didn't know there was a Western component, really. I never even thought about Emerson as being an exponent of these ideas. But so I began planning for a trip to India, kind of, but I decided first of all to go to Greece. I had friends who lived on an island in Greece, and they had a house that they were leaving, and $12 a month, I think it was, and it just seemed like the right thing. And I had been working at NBC News, and they knew I wanted to leave, and they gave me this amazing job, doing a doing JFK Remembered, and then the obituary, premature obituary for Johnson and for Charles de Gaulle. I worked on these, and I made a lot of extra money doing that. And the idea was that when I had enough money, I would then either leave to go on this world journey, or I would get a promotion at NBC and stay there for the rest of my life. And I finally decided, when I made this money, that I was definitely leaving. And the send-off from NBC was amazing. It was like everyone in the news department, except for Huntley Brinkley, everybody else came together at this huge restaurant called Headquarters. Eisenhower's chief of staff, his cook, created this restaurant. And everybody there sent me off. They were there to celebrate the one thing they most wanted, which was to get out of NBC. Every one of them, and I was the only one doing it. And they were so grateful that one person had escaped from the bondage of a career that would last the rest of their lives. And I didn't fully understand that, but that was the journey. And I got to Greece, and my friends left within 4 days, so I was really on my own. But I had carried all of these books, like in the Kazantzakis novel. I had all these books that were so heavy I couldn't get them to my house. I had a knapsack, and I put them on a mule and got them to my house. And they were all books on mysticism and Tibetan Buddhism, and of course there was also Yogananda. And so I was reading these books, sitting and trying to meditate, and all sorts of other things got in the way. A girlfriend, real friends that I made there who were wonderful, Ritsina, which is a great drink, and I somehow I just got to a point where I said, I got to let all this go. I had to send all my books back to America, which I did, and I stuck out my thumb and I began this journey overland to India, because I believe that's where the answers were. Yogananda said that's where the answers were, and that's where the gurus were. They were not, as far as I could tell, in New York City, which is where I was living. So I got to India, and I began what I realize now, especially watching that movie last night and reading things recently. There's a classical journey for everybody. We're all on it. It's how do you begin to uncover the wisdom of the East? How do you begin to imbibe this incredible world of stillness, of meditation, of reaching inward, of finding a universe inside yourself rather than just building a career and family and getting wealthy on the outside? Finding this other thing, which seemed like a very important alternative to the Western sort of idea of happiness and joy, which clearly anybody who had parents knew didn't work, because happiness and joy were very, very temporal things, and I wanted something more than that. And it seemed like I wasn't the only one, because there were a lot of people going to India, and you go to certain places when you get to India. My road to India took me through some amazing countries like Iran and Afghanistan and Turkey and Pakistan. So it was a part of the world that today is aflame, or in flames, on so many levels, but then it was not. But you could feel the seeds of that even back then. Something was disruptive going on, but it was still peaceful enough to make the journey. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about cultures. I learned a lot about how cultures don't obey the border lines that people establish for them. Pakistan was not defined by the sign saying you are now entering Pakistan. It spread this way and it spread that way, and so did Afghanistan, and so did Iran. Peoples and cultures melded, but the strange lines that they have to separate them are very false lines and create a lot of hostility among people, because there is no border distinguishing us one from the other. We are one flowing, extraordinary expression of human experience. I get to India, and following, in a way, Yogananda's dictums, I started going to the places where there were teachers. And Vivekananda's teacher, and I love Vivekananda's writings as well, was Shivananda, and he had an ashram in Rishikesh. And so I went to Rishikesh and met with the people who were part of his organization. And they were very nice people. They were really nice people, and they had these obelisks, which I talk about a lot, all over the ashram, of things you can't do, including dancing, sex, eating meat, on and on and on. Just listen, of things you don't dare do. And I went, oof, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can give up all that stuff. I don't even fully understand why I need to give it up. But there was this idea of purity, of becoming pure. And I knew I was not pure. I always knew that since I was a kid. I mean, I wanted to do weird things with women and other people, and they're just, things were not pure. But I just thought, okay, I'm going to explore and see if there are other ways, other people who are teaching, because Yogananda didn't meet his guru for a long time. He just kind of appeared. In fact, he describes it as walking down the street and feeling someone behind him, and he just kind of turned around, and there he was. And he recognized him instantly, and he went over to him and bowed down and touched his feet, and then he began his journey at the feet of his teacher. And I'm sure I have his name wrong, but I think it's Sri Yukteswar. And he sat with him, and then he got this message, go to the West and teach. Go share this with the West. And he did. And the journey did not embrace him immediately. It really took a while. It took like 3 years. He went to Boston. He felt he had landed in the wrong soil. And he felt the right soil would be Los Angeles. God knows why anybody would think that. But he did. He went to Los Angeles, and it was like immediate growing for him. So the roots settled, life happened. He became a world teacher there. And you listen to his teachings, and they're very much like what's in his book. And they have a lot to do with a kind of a strange design. One of them is that God is in your spine. And I never fully understood that. I bought it. But the idea that God was in my spine didn't totally make sense to me. But I knew it was internal somewhere. I knew there was something going on there. And he also had these phenomenal visions. He had incredible visions, and they were all full of magic and supernatural awareness and attainment. And I was drawn to that. I just wanted that. I wanted to be a supernatural human being, kind of like Superman. And I have a feeling, it's very funny, our culture is also drawn to that. Our whole Western culture is much more attuned to becoming a superhero than anything else. And if you look at our movies, that's what people pay to go see. That and the fantasy cartoons. We love cartoons because they are not fully formed worlds. They're worlds that just appeal to the childlike nature in us, and they're easy to absorb. So superheroes and fantasy. And in a certain sense, Yogananda represented a kind of superhero fantasy realm. And I was drawn to it. And I kept looking for it, and I didn't find it in India. I met lots of teachers. I lived in a Tibetan monastery. I tried everything I could think of. Ended up going to Southeast Asia. I ended up going to Japan, looking for people who would give me supernatural power. The ability to look into other people and know what they were thinking. The ability to leave my body and be in other places at the same time. Lots and lots of powers that people get. And I wanted that for me. I wanted to be a teacher. And it was really, really important. But I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it. And I came back to America for basically one primary reason. I was sitting in a record store in Japan, in Tokyo, and 2 records came on at the record store. They were playing them in the store. One was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which just blew me away. I said, oh my God, the Beatles, they know something. They know something. Is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, really? And the whole album just spoke to me. It was a whole new way of looking at the world. And I said, something's happening in the West that was really thrilling. It was like the East was breaking through. And then there was a surrealistic pillow and this extraordinary song called Don't You Need Somebody to Love? And Gracie Slick sang that, and I heard it, and I said, well, there you go. That's what I need. The whole trip came back to that. I just need somebody to love. Forget gurus. forget everything that failed for me in India because I didn't get what I was looking for. And I came back to America. And within a week, I'm living with George and Cheryl Subkoff. They said, "Do you want to meet a girl?" I said, "Yes." And I kind of had said to God, and forgive me if you've heard this story 1,000 times, I said, "Bring me someone to love. I don't care who it is, I will love them." And Blanche walks through the door. And I went home with her that night, and I told her this whole story. I told her everything. I didn't leave one thing unsaid in that meeting. Meeting is the wrong word, but when we were together, I talked for 3 hours, and you know I can do that. And at the end of it, I said, "Do you want to be part of this? You know, here I am. You walked in the door. You're it. I'm willing to give you everything." And she was scared to death, and basically thought I was totally crazy, and said yes. She said yes, which is the most amazing thing ever, and here we are. You know, this is almost 47 years later. And then it is apocryphal, we don't know for sure, but I believe that morning I met Rudy. And I met Rudy going into his store to carry these Tibetan carpets, like magic carpets, literally, that I had to sell for these monks I was living with in Kathmandu because they were impoverished. And I took him to Rudy's store because I had been there before, and I take him into the store, and that wants nothing to do with the carpets, although he told me where I could sell them and where I did go and sell them, and the whole story of how I met Rudy. But it was like Yogananda. He said, "I can teach you everything you want to know," and I knew it was true. I just knew it was true, and I started to really feel I'm going to get my supernatural powers. I'm going to become this powerful guru, because I was with he was powerful. I knew he was powerful. I didn't even know how, but he emanated power and insight and strength and clarity, all of these extraordinary things. And within a few weeks of studying with him, something remarkable would happen. I would sit with him and he would look at me like this, and I would fall on the ground, literally fall over. And I went, "Oh, this is real. This is real. This isn't playtime. This is the real thing." And I would fall over for years. And if I didn't fall over, literally fall over, I would think something was wrong with me. I mean, I looked to fall over. I wanted this energy surging up my spine. I wanted it blasting into the cosmos. And it did. It did. I kept going, oh. I would be out there. I would be literally out there. And I would be going, this is it. If I could only go more out there. I didn't even know what more out there was, but I wanted more out there. I wanted bigger and better. And it got kind of bigger and better, but it wasn't like, well, you know what happened? I came down. I came back to here. Each time I came back to where I was. I felt great because I knew I was on the path to supernatural greatness. I knew I had found the authentic teacher. I had found the real woman in my life. I had gotten everything. Suddenly I had children. I mean, there was this amazing thing going on. Life was so full. And I kept thinking, if I keep working, I will do what Rudy called, which is grow. And growing to me meant exactly what Yogananda talked about, this awakening into pure largeness of being. In other words, to be a world power. Only it never happened. Years went by, years, and then Rudy died. And I thought, oh my God, it's never going to happen now. Rudy's not there. But he had other teachers who were promising kind of the same thing. So I would study with these guys. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never happened. I don't know what it was, but I knew whatever it was wasn't happening. And I realized then that I'd been betrayed somehow. Partly by me, but partly by Yogananda. Yogananda kept promising in some interesting way this otherness, this vast otherness. And nowadays, when I look at everybody out there, and it's interesting because they have lots of movies of him teaching and all the people sitting in the auditorium, and they are white-haired women primarily, and their old husbands who were probably dragged along to these free talks that he gave. And he's there with maybe 6,000 people, I don't know what he's there with. And he always had his picture taken with all these people. And they all look like, where are we? What is this? It was very strange. They wanted to hear what he had to say. And what he had to say was important. It was meaningful. But I don't think I don't know how many of them got it. I mean, enough of them got it to begin to be his disciples, and they would gather around him, and they built ashrams, and all these things started to happen. And every one of them, I believe, was looking for what I was looking for. They were all looking for supernatural power. Or, let me put it another way. As much as you may want that power, there's another correlate to that, corollary to that, which is you want to be annihilated. And that's the exact opposite. To be everything and to be nothing. And so a lot of people, I discovered, were looking in some way for a kind of suicide. A suicide that let them finally be free of themselves. They wanted to die to who they were because they didn't like themselves, they were imperfect, they were impure, they weren't who they wanted to be. Life was painful, they were full of suffering, and so they looked to spiritual teaching as a way of finally breaking free of their pain and their sense of limited identity. So you either wanted to be everything so you could control the universe, or you wanted to be nothing so you couldn't be controlled by the universe. But everyone was failing on both ends. There was just constant failure, and the sense that if I keep going, I will get there. I will finally arrive at my full true self. So I was definitely on that path. I was committed enough that I knew if I kept this going for all those years, finally it would happen. And then it never happened. And finally I started to say to myself, there's nothing that's supposed to happen. It's not going to happen. That there was a betrayal of some sort in all of this, a promise, kind of a fantasy land promise. And I just gave up. I gave up. I gave up trying to get there. Giving up, Rudy had a word for it. Surrender. Surrender. I surrendered. Not going to happen. Within a week or two of that real surrender, this thing happened at a meeting of supposedly, probably, awakened beings in North Carolina. I was sitting there, and when the talk that was being given by this amazing guy, Paul Hederman, was over, I said, something so weird has happened. So weird. I couldn't find Bruce. There was no I to go to. There was just no I. It was just this. I've told this many times, so it's not new to a lot of you. But the last thing had happened that I'd ever expected to happen, which is there was no I to become a superhero. That the truth was there was no I, period. That the annihilation of Bruce was not a loss of what is, it was the entry into what is. What was lost was the filter. The filter and the idea and the identity of being a Bruce, which the entire world had worked at creating and does for each one of us from the very beginning. We are indoctrinated into being what we think we are. And awakening or enlightenment is the loss of that. If you lose it too quickly and unexpectedly, it's a very devastating and terrifying thing. Because to believe that you are something and someone and then find out you're nothing at all, you don't even really exist on some level, you don't know where to go with that. You hear about Eckhart Tolle when it happened to him, sitting on a park bench for 2 years going, what was that? What is this? For me, it was LSD happened in the 1960s, which blasted me out of myself, and then it took me 40 years to finally complete that process. And by complete, this is a part of the drama and the illusion of the teachings of, like Yogananda and many other great saints, is that this misunderstanding that you will attain this thing, and then you realize when there's no you to attain it, doesn't get rid of the thing. It's just all there is. This is what is. This is the absolute totality, and you are it without anything moderating it. You are the living version of it. In other words, your suffering is gone, your personal suffering, because there's nobody to have suffering, but suffering is still there. Your personal bliss is gone, but bliss is still there. There is this extraordinary what isness, thisness, what exists. And you are that. You are that without any personality or anything. You're just all there is. And it's big. Actually, it has no size at all. You can make it as big as you want or as minute as you want. It's either atomic in structure or a universal vastness. It's impossible to tell because there's no duality. There's no two. There's no big and small. There's just everything simultaneously. And what's interesting is in that absolute annihilation of you, there's still a particle of you that's there. It's still there. So there you are, oscillating between this tiny little nothing and everything. And the pull back to the particle is very strong. So a lot of people who have an awakening and enlightenment find that they suddenly get pulled back into this dense little tiny thing and don't remember how to get out of it. But it doesn't mean that that vastness and bigness isn't still there. It's just that the power of the illusion is so intense. And let's not even call it an illusion. The power of the particle is so powerful that you can get drawn back into it. Then what you have to do, and this is really where spiritual work comes into play, is go, even this. I accept even this. This density of Bruce, even that is part of the whole. And when you start to do that, it goes, and then you start to walk around as vast being and tiny being all at the same time. That's what you are. That's what we all are. And the only difference between any of us is how lost you are and connected you are to this limited self that has your name. Is that truly all you are? Well, according to people like Yogananda and Vivekananda and Nisargadatta and Rudy and all these amazing people, Nityananda, no, it's not all you are. But the fact that you're caught in that and need to and want to break free of it is the path. And you would not be sitting here today if you were not on that path, because you realize somewhere that you either want to be annihilated or you want to be a superhero. Or sometimes they call it free. You want to be liberated. Free. Free of what? Usually suffering, pain. Is there a freedom from suffering and pain? Yes. Does freedom and pain, the suffering go away and pain? No. But you are not caught in it. You're not caught in it until you are. And I will tell you, all the great liberated, enlightened teachers that I know of, I can't speak for everybody, but so many that I know of, enter into, especially at the end of their life, pain and suffering, and they don't know how to get out of it. It's so powerful. It's so intense. Nisargadatta, who wrote the book I Am That, who's one of my the beacons of light that comes through to me, he hated the end of his life. He hated it. He said, why did I ever get born? It was so painful. I go through pain that I find to be unacceptable. It's so powerful. And I talked about it, I think it was last week's talk, because I had had it a couple of weeks before. It was lasted 3 days, but it was like, get me out of here. This is unbearable. This is unbearable. Why is this happening to me? There was so much me bruising in it, and I just was in such agony. And of course, when you have that happen, you begin to go, who am I to talk about awakening and enlightenment? And what a sham! It's all bullshit. I'm just this suffering thing. But I also knew, strangely enough, I said, this is a storm. This is a storm. It's passing through. That is not unlike what I call global warming. The storms today that we're getting are not like the storms of yesteryear. The storms are big, they're powerful, and they're going to affect all of us. And so when you get caught in it, the only thing you have is one, maybe, the recognition that, oh, this is a storm, meaning that it passes. Because as Buddha taught us, everything is impermanent, even your suffering and your bliss. It all passes. And so what you end up with is something moving through the system. What is the system? What is it moving through? I was talking to Talia the other day about moods, because she gets in them. And I talked about how they're just like storms going through the sky, like dark clouds come in the sky and thunder and lightning, and then they go away. And some days beautiful clouds, you can look it up at them like little animals and people, and they fade away. I said, this stuff all passes through the sky. And this is an image a lot of Buddhist and Hindu teachers use, because basically we're the sky, and these things pass through. And to know that you are the sky in which things occur. You're identifying with things that occur is completely human nature. We all do it. And you can get lost in it, and people do get lost in it. But it clears, it comes back, and you find your way back to clear, beautiful sky. What I'm trying to say with all of this is that the journey to everything I'm talking about is predictable. It's a predictable journey. We are going to be led into it for probably the wrong reasons. One is to become a super something and to own that and perhaps even be recognized for that, which creates spiritual ego, which is probably the most difficult thing to get rid of. Or to annihilate yourself because you can't stand living with you anymore, or with your pain, or whatever it is. And whatever brings you to these teachers, they are going to promise you relief. It's absolute promise. And if you start studying with them, like when I studied with Rudy, relief was not even the operating word. It was like awareness of something vast and powerful, which I thought was other than this. I thought it was, I have to blast out of this to get there. The truth is, there and here are one thing. It's just one thing. You can blast out of this, but you will come back to this. This is the energy source. This is where you derive the power and the ability to rise up, and you also come back and live within this world. This is that. And when you learn to live in this world with your eyes open, with an open heart, with an open gut, when you learn to function well, when you learn to speak truth, when you learn to see deeply into life and into yourself, when you have an open channel to the vastness of being, when all of these chakras are functioning, when there's this energy that moves up your spine and integrates all these parts of you so you become a real and absolutely whole person, when all of this is happening, it is exactly as Rudy said, not the goal of your spiritual life, it's the beginning of your spiritual life. You want to present and be a whole person that lives this life. And the spiritual life that we are led into is a life of kind of lies in some level. Because we're all expecting something that is all sweetness and light, transcendence. Somehow we're all going to be joyful beings, full of bliss, and we will never suffer again. That is not true in my experience. If it is true, I'll come back and tell you if I ever figure that part out. And I'll tell you my version of it, and I'm hoping you will go on your version of it, and you come back and tell me, because that would be great. But I think what we will discover, together or separately, will be our own sense of truth. We will find a truth. Maybe it's the truth. Right now, for me, the truth is, this is it. This is it. And we're all it. And we're all equally capable of arriving at an awareness of this. Not only is this it, it's kind of all there is. Perhaps on some vast cosmic scale, this is all there is. It's hard to describe what that means, but it's something I believe very deeply, that there may not be anything else but this. It just keeps happening. Like this is the sky, and it just fills with, here's a class, now here's a car, now we're in San Rafael, now we're in Berkeley, now we're in wherever we are. We're all, things are moving, but they're all filling this that we are. What else is going on? But you don't have to get caught in that, because that's just mental stuff. The important thing is, if you sit quietly, regularly, you find this refuge, this place of knowing. You don't know what it knows, but it knows itself. It reflects on its own truth. And then life comes in, and you find this refuge again and again and again. And the more brutal life is, the more this refuge means to you. But you're not trying to hide from the world, because this refuge is part of the world. It's part of who you are. It's part of the journey that we're on. To know the refuge, to have it to go to, it's better than alcohol, it's better than drugs, it's better than anything. It's right there, it's free, it's accessible. You can just go, except for days where you can't, which will happen. But when you can, you go there, and it's a great place. It's not the goal, it's just part of the way. It's part of the journey. It's part of the whole that we are in. And we are so blessed to have found that, because it speaks to the whole. And one of the things we discover in this journey is that growing, which Rudy talked about a lot, is not attainment. It's not gaining power. It's giving up everything. Growing is how much you can let go of. The more you let go of, the more this nut, this hard nut that you are of your ego mind, breaks apart. And it falls away. And what happens when it falls away? The oak tree appears. Growing is letting go of your ego, not building it. Not becoming a superhero, becoming yourself. Not annihilating who you are, but letting go of who you are, so that what you are shows what it is. That's what happens here. And it's an astounding journey, and we're on it together. People like Yogananda, even if they make you, in your mind, think you're going to gain all of this stuff, they at least initiate the process. You may at one point look at him and go, what were you talking about? But it doesn't matter, because you'll know deep down what he was talking about. It wasn't that, it was this. So, this is our first class in San Rafael. I'm not going to speak for you, but for me the room worked perfectly. It's a very good space. It's very vibrant. The energy that each of you brought to this class was remarkable to me, like at another level from what I've experienced before. I'm not looking for measurement exactly, but I'm looking for substance. There was substance. It's available. We're going to sit here, as long as people come, and I may sit here even when people don't come, and we will have an opportunity to bathe in the same water, and walking out of it refreshed, renewed, reminded of what's possible in our lives, and then take it with us. And at some point, if I had this power, I would just blow away your ego right now. Because it's not that hard, honestly, but you're not. Nobody wants to let me do it. But if you could just say, okay, you would realize everything that's being said here as true for you. And that's all I want. It happens. But and I'll say it one last time. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter, because you still get to bathe and be renewed and restored and live a life that's in touch with His vastness. And when that realization finally hits you, which may be on your deathbed or whatever, it'll be completing. It doesn't matter if it completes it today or it completes it then. The only advantage of completing it now is you get to walk around in a state of amazement. And you can do that now anyway. You really can. You don't need me, you don't need anyone, you don't need anything. Just do it. Just don't take it for granted. Don't take any of this for granted. I mean, how can you? And especially we live in Marin County and in Sonoma County. I mean, it doesn't get better, kind of. So, stop complaining about, you have a scratched car, which I do, or flat tires, which I had in LA. Forget it. It's just what you do. You just take care of it and live your life, and know that you are among the really blessed people in the world, because you have knowledge of, wisdom of, acknowledgement of this possibility of being truly who you are. Okay. Any questions today? You don't have to have questions. But if you ever do, feel free. Email, call, or you can ask them in class. course, it just makes these talks last a lot longer. Okay, thank you guys for coming. Next week there will be class again, and then the week after we're in New York City. And I will actually upstate New York, Big Indian. So any of you who hear this want to go to Big Indian the weekend of November 1st. Thank you.